The sun was setting on Interstate 95 when Staff Sergeant Thomas Rodriguez pulled into the Rest Haven service station. After 15 hours of driving from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, his muscles were stiff, and his eyes were heavy with fatigue. All he wanted was a quick coffee and maybe a sandwich before pushing through the final stretch of his journey home. The service station was relatively quiet for a Friday evening, with only a handful of travelers moving between their vehicles and the building. As Rodriguez stepped out of his truck, still in his service uniform, he noticed a peculiar sight that made him pause. A young black woman, probably in her early 20s, was standing near the vending machines with an older white man who appeared to be in his 50s. Something about their body language caught his attention. While the man was smiling and talking animatedly, the young woman's posture was rigid, her shoulders tense. To an untrained eye, it might have looked like a normal conversation, but Rodriguez's years of military training had taught him to notice the subtle signs of distress. As he walked past them towards the entrance, he saw the young woman's hand make a distinct movement. 3 quick taps, 3 slow taps, followed by 3 more quick taps. His heart rate quickened as he recognized the pattern, SOS in Morse code. It was a universal distress signal, one that every Marine learned during basic training. Rodriguez didn't break his stride or give any indication that he'd noticed the signal. Instead, he walked into the service station, his mind already formulating a plan. He knew he needed to act quickly but cautiously. A wrong move could put both the young woman and other travelers in danger. At the counter, he purchased his coffee while discreetly observing the pair through the store's large windows. The man was now guiding the woman towards a white panel van parked in the far corner of the lot, partially hidden from the main building's view. Rodriguez noticed there was no license plate on the van's front, another red flag that set off alarm bells in his mind. He pulled out his phone and pretended to take a call, stepping outside while keeping the pair in his peripheral vision. Years of tactical training had taught him to gather intelligence without drawing attention to himself. He noticed other subtle details, the woman's slightly disheveled appearance, the way she kept looking around as if searching for help, and most importantly, the man's hand firmly gripping her upper arm. Rodriguez knew he had to make a decision. His instincts told him this wasn't a simple domestic dispute or misunderstanding. The combination of the SOS signal, the suspicious van, and the visible signs of distress pointed to something far more sinister. But he also knew that direct confrontation could escalate the situation dangerously. Drawing from his military experience, he remembered that the most successful operations were often the ones that appeared routine and unremarkable to observers. He needed to create an intervention that wouldn't raise suspicions until the right moment. As he watched the man trying to usher the young woman into the van, Rodriguez began implementing his plan, knowing that the next few minutes would be crucial. The weight of his phone felt heavy in his hand as he dialed 911, keeping his voice low and calm while maintaining visual contact with the situation unfolding in the parking lot. His training had prepared him for high-stakes situations, but this was different. This was about protecting innocent lives on home soil, and failure wasn't an option. As Rodriguez spoke quietly into his phone, he maintained his composed demeanor while relaying crucial information to the 911 dispatcher. His military training kicked in as he provided clear, concise details about the situation. He knew that every second counted, but rushing could spell disaster. "Ma'am, I need units at the Rest Haven service station off I-95, mile marker 157, he whispered, positioning himself behind a nearby truck to stay out of sight. Possible trafficking situation in progress. Suspect attempting to force a young woman into a white panel van, no front plates. I'm a Marine staff sergeant, and the victim signaled SOS. The dispatcher's professional response was reassuring, but Rodriguez knew help was at least 10 minutes away. 10 minutes could feel like an eternity in a situation like this. He needed to buy time without escalating the situation. Drawing from his experience in tactical situations, Rodriguez formulated a plan. He noticed 2 other travelers filling up their cars at the gas pumps, a middle-aged couple who looked like they were on a road trip. If things went south, having additional witnesses could be crucial. The man was still trying to get the young woman into the van, but she was clearly stalling, making small movements that delayed the process without being obvious about it. Rodriguez recognized this as another survival tactic. She was smart, buying herself precious time while trying not to antagonize her captor. Making a swift decision, Rodriguez walked toward the van, deliberately taking a wrong turn as if looking for his own vehicle. He fumbled with his keys, appearing distracted while actually positioning himself between the van and its exit route. His peripheral vision caught the young woman's eyes briefly meeting his. There was recognition there, and something else, hope. "Everything all right over here?" Rodriguez called out casually, pretending to realize he'd walked in the wrong direction. His voice was friendly, but his stance was calculated, ready for any sudden movements. "This lot's like a maze at night. Been walking in circles trying to find my truck." The man's reaction was subtle but telling. His grip on the woman's arm tightened slightly, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. "We're fine," he replied, too quickly. "Just helping my niece with her car trouble." Rodriguez noticed the woman's slight head shake at the word niece. He kept his expression neutral, maintaining the casual conversation while scanning for weapons or accomplices. "Car trouble's the worst. I've got some tools in my truck if you need them. Been fixing vehicles since my first tour overseas." The mention of his military service was deliberate. Rodriguez watched as the man processed this information, saw the flicker of uncertainty cross his face. The young woman seized this moment of distraction to shift her weight slightly, creating more distance between herself and the van. In the distance, Rodriguez heard what he'd been waiting for, the faint sound of sirens. The man heard them too, his posture stiffening. Rodriguez knew the next few moments would be critical. Sometimes the most dangerous part of any situation was when a suspect realized they were cornered. "Actually," Rodriguez continued, his voice still conversational but his body tensed for action, "I think I saw a state trooper pulling in just a minute ago. They're pretty good with car trouble too. Want me to wave them over?" The man's facade cracked slightly. His eyes darted toward the service station exit, then back to his van. Rodriguez could almost see him calculating his odds, weighing his options. The young woman remained still, but Rodriguez could sense her preparing herself, just as he was. The sirens were getting louder now, unmistakable. The middle-aged couple at the gas pumps had stopped what they were doing, aware that something was unfolding. The man's grip on the woman's arm loosened slightly, a telltale sign that he was preparing to run. Rodriguez had seen this moment countless times during his military service, the split second in a situation could go either way. He kept his body language open and non-threatening, but he was ready. His muscles were coiled, prepared to react to whatever came next. The sound of tires on gravel announced the arrival of the first police car, and time seemed to compress. The man shoved the woman away suddenly, making a break for the driver's side of the van. Rodriguez was already moving, his body responding with years of trained precision. The young woman stumbled backward, but Rodriguez's steady hand caught her arm, stabilizing her while keeping his eyes on the fleeing suspect. The next few moments unfolded like a well-rehearsed drill, though Rodriguez knew from experience that real-life situations rarely went according to plan. As the suspect sprinted toward the van's driver's side, two police cruisers pulled into the parking lot, their lights painting the scene in alternating red and blue. The young woman was trembling but standing firm, her breath coming in quick gasps. Rodriguez guided her carefully toward the service station building, positioning himself between her and any potential danger. His voice remained steady as he spoke to her, "You're safe now. I've got you. The officers will handle this." The suspect had managed to wrench open the van's door, but he'd lost precious seconds fumbling with his keys. The first police officer was already out of his cruiser, weapon drawn, giving clear commands, "Stop. Police. Put your hands where we can see them. Rodriguez noticed more details now that backup had arrived. The van's side door was partially open, revealing glimpses of what looked like blankets and supplies in the back. His stomach tightened as he realized what they might have prevented. He'd seen similar setups during his military training sessions on human trafficking awareness. The middle-aged couple from the gas pumps had taken shelter inside their car, the woman already on her phone, likely calling for additional help or recording the scene. Other travelers who had been inside the service station were gathering near the windows, their faces a mixture of concern and curiosity. "I need medical assistance here," Rodriguez called out to the approaching second officer, noting the young woman's physical state. Though she hadn't been seriously injured, he recognized the signs of dehydration and exhaustion. Her wrists showed marks from what appeared to be restraints, though she'd managed to free herself at some point. The suspect, realizing he was surrounded, made one last desperate attempt. He reached for something under the driver's seat, but before he could grab whatever he was seeking, two officers tackled him to the ground. The takedown was swift and professional, and within moments, he was in handcuffs. More police cars were arriving now, along with an ambulance, its siren cutting through the evening air. Rodriguez stayed with the young woman, knowing from his training that maintaining a sense of security was crucial in these first few moments of freedom. He spoke softly, asking simple questions to keep her focused and present. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked gently. When she whispered it, her voice was hoarse but determined. She revealed she was a college student who had been abducted 3 days ago from a parking lot in Georgia. She'd maintained her composure, waiting for the right moment to signal for help, just as she'd learned in a self-defense class. The paramedics approached carefully, their movements deliberate and non-threatening. Rodriguez stepped back slightly but remained nearby as they began their assessment. The young woman reached out suddenly, gripping his sleeve. "Please don't leave," she pleaded, her eyes wide with residual fear. "I'll stay right here," Rodriguez assured her, glancing at the paramedics who nodded their agreement. As they checked her vital signs and began basic treatment, more details of her ordeal emerged. She had been walking to her car after a late study session when she was approached by the man, who had asked for directions. The simple request had turned into a nightmare. State police investigators arrived on the scene, their unmarked cars pulling in quietly. One of them approached Rodriguez, notebook in hand. As a key witness, his statement would be crucial. He provided a detailed account of everything he'd observed, from the initial SOS signal to the final moments of the confrontation. The investigator's face grew increasingly serious as Rodriguez described the van's interior glimpsed during the arrest. A quick search had revealed equipment and supplies consistent with human trafficking operations. The suspect, they learned, was wanted in connection with similar incidents in 3 other states. The ambulance team was preparing to transport the young woman to the nearest hospital for a thorough examination. Before they loaded her into the vehicle, she turned to Rodriguez, tears finally breaking through her brave facade. "How did you know?" she asked. "I wasn't sure anyone would recognize the signal." Rodriguez smiled gently. "Every Marine learns Morse code. We're trained to notice things others might miss. But you're the real hero here. You kept your head clear and found a way to signal for help. That takes incredible courage." The investigators had more questions, but they agreed to continue the interview at the hospital. As Rodriguez watched the ambulance pull away, its lights flashing silently now, he felt a profound mix of emotions. His military training had prepared him for combat zones overseas, but tonight it had served a different purpose, saving a life right here at home. As the night deepened at Rest Haven service station, the initial chaos had given way to methodical police work. Rodriguez found himself sitting in a state police cruiser, providing additional details to Detective Chen, who was piecing together the broader implications of tonight's events. "Your observation skills potentially broke open a multi-state trafficking ring," Chen explained, his fingers flying across his laptop keyboard. We've been tracking similar incidents along the I-95 corridor for months, but the suspects were always gone before we could intervene. Tonight changed everything. The detective turned his screen, showing Rodriguez a map dotted with red markers along the eastern seaboard. Each point represented a similar incident, young women vanishing from public places, often near interstate highways. The pattern was clear now, and tonight's arrest could help bring the entire operation down. Outside the cruiser, forensics teams were carefully processing the white van. Their powerful lights illuminated the parking lot, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Rodriguez watched as they catalogued evidence, his military training helping him understand the importance of their methodical approach. His phone buzzed, a message from his commanding officer responding to his brief update about the situation. "Outstanding work, Staff Sergeant. This is why we train like we do. Report to me when you're back on base." The simple message carried the weight of pride and approval that every Marine understood. The middle-aged couple who had witnessed everything were still there, providing their statements to another officer. The woman, Rodriguez learned, had managed to take several clear photos of the van and suspect on her phone, which would prove invaluable for the investigation. They had also called several other vehicles into the service station, creating more witnesses and making it harder for the suspect to escape. Around midnight, Rodriguez received word from the hospital. The young woman was stable and receiving care. Her parents were already on their way from Georgia, having been notified by the police. She had asked if Rodriguez could visit tomorrow. She wanted to properly thank the Marine who had recognized her call for help. Detective Chen closed his laptop and turned to Rodriguez with a thoughtful expression. "You know, it's interesting," he said, "we train law enforcement to look for certain signs, specific indicators of trafficking. But sometimes it's the smallest things, like someone recognizing a distress signal, that make all the difference." Rodriguez nodded, thinking about the countless hours spent learning and practicing Morse code during his military training. At the time, it had seemed like just another requirement to check off. Now, that simple skill had helped save a life and potentially many more. The investigation was revealing more disturbing details. The suspect's van contained evidence suggesting this wasn't his first abduction. There were multiple cell phones, IDs, and personal items belonging to other potential victims. Each item represented another life disrupted, another family searching for answers. As dawn approached, Rodriguez finally prepared to leave. The service station had returned to its normal operation, though yellow police tape still cordoned off a section of the parking lot. The night shift workers had provided free coffee to all the officers and witnesses, a small gesture of community support that touched Rodriguez deeply. Before departing, Detective Chen handed Rodriguez his card. "We'll need you to testify when this goes to trial," he explained. "Your military background and training will make you a strong witness. The DA's office will be in touch." Rodriguez pocketed the card, understanding that his involvement in this story wasn't over yet. The drive home gave Rodriguez time to process everything that had happened. His training had taught him to stay focused during high-stress situations, but now, in the quiet of his truck, the full weight of the night's events settled in. He thought about how many times he had driven past this same rest stop, how many other travelers might have missed similar signs of distress. His phone buzzed again, this time a message from a fellow Marine who had heard about the incident through the grapevine. Word was spreading through the military community, and Rodriguez knew this story would likely be used in future training sessions. Perhaps it would help other service members recognize similar situations. As the sun began to rise, painting the highway in soft golden light, Rodriguez reflected on how a routine stop for coffee had turned into something so significant. His military training had prepared him for combat zones and tactical situations, but tonight it had served an equally important purpose here at home. The following morning, Rodriguez arrived at the county hospital, his uniform freshly pressed. The events of the previous night felt almost surreal in the bright morning light, but the bustling police presence outside the hospital reminded him of the gravity of the situation. In the hospital lobby, he met Detective Chen again, who was coordinating with FBI agents who had arrived early that morning. The case had officially become a federal investigation due to its multi-state nature. Agent Rivera, a veteran FBI investigator, briefed Rodriguez on what they had learned overnight. The suspect's fingerprints matched those found at 3 other scenes, Rivera explained quietly. But what's more significant is what we found on his phones. There's evidence of a larger network, and your intervention may have given us the break we've been looking for. The young woman's parents had arrived from Georgia a few hours earlier. When Rodriguez entered the hospital room, her father stood immediately, eyes brimming with tears. Without a word, he pulled Rodriguez into a tight embrace. Her mother, sitting beside the hospital bed, wiped her eyes while maintaining a gentle grip on her daughter's hand. Our baby girl knew Morse code because her grandfather was a Navy man, her mother explained, her voice thick with emotion. He always insisted she learn it, said you never know when it might come in handy. We never imagined. She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. The young woman, looking stronger than the night before, managed a small smile. I kept thinking about Grandpa's lessons, she said. When I saw your uniform, I knew it was my chance. I just kept praying you would notice. Rodriguez listened as she shared more details about her ordeal. She was a nursing student, determined not to let this experience derail her dreams. Her courage in the face of such trauma was remarkable, and Rodriguez found himself deeply moved by her resilience. Outside the room, Detective Chen shared more developments. The suspect had started talking, hoping for a deal. His information had already led to 2 more arrests in Virginia, and investigators were closing in on other members of the trafficking network. The middle-aged couple from the rest stop had shared their photos with law enforcement, and their clear images of the van and suspect were proving invaluable. They had also gone to local media, not for attention, but to raise awareness about trafficking warning signs and the importance of being observant travelers. By afternoon, Rodriguez's commanding officer had arrived at the hospital. Captain Reynolds wanted to personally understand the situation and show support for both Rodriguez and the victim's family. The captain spoke briefly with the family, assuring them that the Marine Corps would provide any assistance needed in the upcoming legal proceedings. Staff Sergeant Reynolds said privately, "Your actions reflect the highest traditions of the Marine Corps. We're implementing new training protocols based on this incident. Your experience will help other service members recognize and respond to similar situations." Local law enforcement agencies were already reaching out, requesting training sessions on recognizing distress signals and trafficking indicators. Rodriguez's quick thinking and response were being held up as a model for how military training could have unexpected applications in civilian life. The hospital's trauma counselor, Dr. Thompson, spent time with both Rodriguez and the young woman, helping them process the events. She explained how crucial the first 48 hours after such incidents were for mental health and recovery. The young woman's strong support system and Rodriguez's military training had both contributed to a better-than-expected outcome. Later that afternoon, news arrived that federal agents had executed search warrants at multiple locations based on information from the suspect's devices. They discovered evidence linking the trafficking ring to operations in 7 states. What had started as a chance encounter at a rest stop was unraveling a major criminal enterprise. The young woman's university dean called, assuring her that arrangements would be made for her to complete her semester without penalty. The nursing faculty had already organized a support system to help her catch up once she was ready to return. Her classmates had started a campaign to raise awareness about safety and self-defense on campus. As Rodriguez prepared to leave the hospital, the young woman's father pulled him aside. "You know," he said, his voice quiet but steady, "when she was little, she always wanted to help others. That's why she chose nursing. Now, because of you, she'll get to fulfill that dream. There's no way we can ever repay you." Rodriguez thought carefully before responding. Sir, in the Marines, we're trained to respond to threats, but we're also taught about duty and honor. Your daughter showed incredible courage and presence of mind. She saved herself, I just happened to be there to help. The best repayment is knowing she'll go on to help others in her own way. In the weeks following the rescue at Rest Haven Service Station, the impact of that night continued to ripple outward. Rodriguez found himself back at Camp Lejeune, where his experience was already being incorporated into new training modules for Marines. The base's training facility was packed as Rodriguez shared his story with fellow service members. His commanding officer had requested he speak about the incident, not for recognition, but to demonstrate how military training could save lives in unexpected ways. The skills we learn here aren't just for deployment, Rodriguez explained to the assembled Marines. That night, it wasn't about combat training or tactical maneuvers. It was about observation, about recognizing a call for help. Sometimes the smallest details can make the biggest difference. The young woman's recovery was progressing well. She had returned to her studies, supported by a network of friends, family, and university staff. Her story had inspired the college to implement new safety protocols and offer free self-defense classes to all students. She occasionally texted Rodriguez updates about her progress, each message a reminder of the lives changed that night. Detective Chen kept Rodriguez informed about the investigation's progress. The federal task force had made significant breakthroughs, identifying trafficking routes and safe houses across multiple states. The evidence recovered from the Rest Haven incident had become a crucial piece in dismantling a larger criminal network. Your intervention that night, Chen explained during one of their conversations, it was like pulling a thread that unraveled the whole operation. We've identified 15 potential victims so far, and we're working to locate them all. Some families who've been searching for months might finally get answers. The middle-aged couple from the rest stop had become advocates for trafficking awareness. They worked with local travel centers to implement better security measures and trained staff to recognize warning signs. Their photos from that night were being used in law enforcement training sessions across the country. Rodriguez's own perspective on his military service had evolved. While he'd always taken pride in his role as a Marine, this incident had shown him how military training could serve communities in ways he hadn't anticipated. His commanding officer had appointed him to help develop a new community outreach program, bridging the gap between military and civilian life. One morning, while reviewing training materials in his office, Rodriguez received an unexpected call. The young woman's grandfather, the retired Navy man who had taught her Morse code, wanted to meet him. They arranged to meet at a local coffee shop near the base. The elderly veteran arrived in a wheelchair, pushed by his son-in-law, but his handshake was firm and his eyes sharp. You know, he said, after they'd settled with their coffee, I taught her that code when she was just a little girl. She'd get frustrated, saying she'd never use it. But I kept telling her, knowledge is never wasted. They spent hours sharing stories, the kind only military veterans would understand. The grandfather spoke about his own service, about the importance of passing on knowledge to younger generations. Sometimes, he reflected, the old ways, the simple skills, they're still the ones that save lives. The incident had sparked changes in highway safety protocols. Rest stops along major interstates were upgrading their security systems and training staff to be more vigilant. The Department of Transportation was developing new guidelines for rest area safety, incorporating lessons learned from the Rest Haven incident. Local communities were also responding. Self-defense instructors reported increased interest in their classes, particularly in learning distress signals and situational awareness. The simple SOS signal that had saved one life was now being taught to thousands. Rodriguez's military unit had received commendations from both state and federal authorities for their role in training Marines to be observant and engaged members of their communities. The base commander was implementing new community integration programs, recognizing that military training had applications far beyond the battlefield. The young woman had started speaking at campus safety workshops, sharing her story to help others. She never focused on the trauma, instead emphasizing the importance of staying alert and knowing how to signal for help. Her nursing studies had taken on new meaning. She wanted to specialize in trauma care, turning her experience into a way to help others heal. 1 year after the incident, Rest Haven service station had been transformed. New lighting illuminated every corner of the parking lot, security cameras covered every angle, and staff members were trained to recognize suspicious behavior. A small plaque near the entrance told the story of that night, reminding travelers that heroes could appear in the most unexpected moments. 18 months after the Rest Haven incident, Rodriguez stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., addressing a congressional committee on transportation safety and human trafficking prevention. The room was packed with lawmakers, law enforcement officials, and advocacy groups, all eager to learn from his experience. What happened that night wasn't just about one rescue, Rodriguez testified, his voice steady and clear. It was about the importance of maintaining awareness, about how simple training can save lives, and about the responsibility we all have to look out for one another. The young woman sat in the gallery, now a newly graduated nurse working in emergency trauma care. She had become an advocate for trafficking awareness and prevention, using her experience to help others. Her presence at the hearing was a powerful reminder of how a single moment of intervention could change the course of many lives. The federal investigation sparked by the Rest Haven incident had led to the dismantling of 3 major trafficking networks operating along the eastern seaboard. Detective Chen, now heading a specialized task force, had tracked down dozens of victims, helping reunite families and bring criminals to justice. The ripple effects of that night continue to expand, Chen explained during a break in the hearings. Every rescued victim leads us to more information, more connections. We're not just solving crimes anymore, we're preventing them from happening in the first place. The middle-aged couple's photographs had become part of a national training program for truck stop and rest area employees. Their quick thinking in documenting the scene had helped create a model for civilian response to suspicious situations. They had been honored by their state governor for their role in public safety awareness. Rodriguez's military career had taken an unexpected turn. While maintaining his active duty status, he had become involved in developing civilian-military cooperation programs. His experience had shown how military training could serve communities in peacetime, leading to new initiatives across all branches of service. Our service members have skills that can benefit communities in countless ways, his commanding officer explained at a press conference. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's actions that night showed us how military training can translate into civilian life-saving situations. We're now incorporating these lessons into our standard training protocols. The young woman's grandfather had become a regular speaker at veterans events, sharing how his insistence on teaching old-school military skills had helped save his granddaughter's life. His advocacy had led to increased interest in teaching traditional communication methods alongside modern technology. You never know when the basics might save your life, he would tell audiences, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. Technology can fail, batteries can die, but knowledge stays with you. Rest Haven had become a model for service station safety nationwide. The Department of Transportation had implemented new guidelines based on the security improvements made there. Security cameras, better lighting, and trained staff had become standard features at rest stops across the country. The nursing school where the young woman had studied had created a new course focusing on recognizing and treating trauma survivors. She occasionally guest lectured, sharing her perspective both as a survivor and a healthcare professional. Her dual experience provided unique insights into patient care and recovery. Local law enforcement agencies had reported a significant increase in public tips about suspicious activity at rest stops and travel centers. The awareness raised by the Rest Haven incident had created a more vigilant and informed public, leading to several successful interventions across the country. It's not about being heroes, Rodriguez explained to a group of police cadets during a training session. It's about being aware, being prepared, and being willing to act when something doesn't feel right. Sometimes the smallest action can prevent the biggest tragedy. The case had also sparked changes in how missing persons cases were handled. Law enforcement agencies had developed new protocols for coordinating across state lines, sharing information more effectively, and responding to potential trafficking situations more quickly. One day, while visiting the improved Rest Haven service station, Rodriguez met a young mother who recognized him from news coverage. She shared how the publicized story had prompted her to enroll her teenage daughters in self-defense classes where they learned various distress signals. "You never think it could happen to your family," she said, emotion clear in her voice. "But knowing there are people out there who notice, who care enough to act, it gives us hope. It makes us feel less vulnerable." The young woman had recently been invited to join a federal advisory committee on trafficking prevention. Her perspective as both a survivor and a healthcare professional brought valuable insights to policy discussions. She often credited her recovery to the network of support she'd received, starting with Rodriguez's intervention that night. 2 years after that fateful night at Rest Haven, Rodriguez stood beside the young woman at a national safety conference. They had been invited as keynote speakers, their story serving as a powerful testament to the importance of awareness, training, and civilian-military cooperation in public safety. The conference hall was filled with law enforcement officers, military personnel, healthcare workers, and civilian advocates. The young woman, now a respected trauma nurse, spoke first, her voice confident and clear as she addressed the audience. 2 years ago, I was a student who thought bad things only happened to other people, she began. Today, I stand here not just as a survivor, but as someone who has dedicated her life to helping others survive and heal. One person's awareness changed everything, not just for me, but for countless others. The federal investigation that began with the Rest Haven incident had expanded beyond anyone's expectations. Detective Chen, presenting updated statistics, revealed that the case had led to over 100 rescues across 12 states. The trafficking networks had been completely dismantled, their operations exposed and shut down. What started as a routine stop for coffee became a turning point in how we approach public safety, Chen explained. It showed us that the most effective defense against crime isn't always high technology or elaborate operations, sometimes it's just alert citizens who know what to look for and aren't afraid to act. Rodriguez's military unit had transformed their community engagement programs. What began as basic safety awareness training had evolved into a comprehensive civilian-military cooperation initiative. Other military bases across the country had adopted similar programs, creating a nationwide network of trained observers. The skills we learn in service aren't just for the battlefield, Rodriguez told the audience. Every day, veterans return to civilian life carrying knowledge that could save lives. It's about bridging the gap between military training and civilian needs, about using our skills to serve our communities in new ways. The Rest Haven service station had become more than just a rest stop, it was now a training center for transportation safety. Staff members from other facilities would come to learn about their enhanced security protocols, and law enforcement agencies used it as a model for public-private partnership in safety initiatives. The middle-aged couple who had documented the incident had founded a non-profit organization dedicated to traveler safety. Their organization provided free safety awareness training at community centers and schools across the country. Their quick thinking that night had inspired a movement of alert travelers who knew how to recognize and report suspicious situations. The young woman's grandfather had seen his passion for traditional communication skills validated in unexpected ways. Military bases had begun incorporating Morse code and other classic signaling methods into their community safety programs. Sometimes the old ways work best, he would say, especially when modern methods might not be available. Healthcare facilities had also learned from the incident. The trauma center where the young woman worked had developed new protocols for identifying and supporting trafficking survivors. Her unique perspective as both a healthcare provider and a survivor had helped create more effective, compassionate approaches to patient care. Every patient who comes through these doors has a story, she explained during a hospital training session. Sometimes they're looking for help but don't know how to ask. That's why awareness and observation are so crucial in healthcare. The Department of Transportation had implemented what became known as the Rest Haven Protocols, standardized safety measures for all highway rest stops. These included improved lighting, security cameras, trained staff, and clear emergency procedures. The protocols had already helped prevent several potential trafficking incidents. Rodriguez had received numerous commendations for his actions, but he remained humble about his role. The real heroes are the people who take these lessons and apply them in their own communities, he would say. Every alert citizen, every trained professional, every person who chooses to pay attention and act, they're the ones making a difference every day. The young woman's nursing career had flourished. She had helped establish a support network for survivors, connecting them with medical care, counseling, and educational opportunities. Her experience had shown her that healing was possible, and she dedicated herself to helping others find their path to recovery. As the conference drew to a close, Rodriguez and the young woman stood together for photographs. The image would appear in newspapers and training materials, a Marine in uniform and a nurse in scrubs, representing the unexpected partnerships that could make communities safer. You know, she said quietly, during a private moment, that night at Rest Haven could have been the worst moment of my life. Instead, it became a beginning, not just for me, but for so many others. It showed us that one person's awareness, one person's willingness to act, can change everything. Rodriguez nodded, thinking about all the changes that had stemmed from that single moment of recognition. That's what service is really about, he replied. Whether it's in uniform or civilian life, it's about being ready to help when help is needed. Sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest impact.